we can now cross over to LA to Ian Reifowitz, Professor of Historical Studies at Emory College. Thanks for joining us at France 24. Ian, could you tell us, what did you make of the tone that President Trump struck at this speech? I mean, it's been decidedly different from his previous speeches, including his inauguration speech last month.
Well, he certainly stuck to his script for most of the speech. In terms of the tone, yes, I think the inaugural speech was really a dark vision for the country, an excessively dark vision. He talked about an American carnage. So, I mean, if you want to say that compared to that other speech, the tone was less dark tonight, you could say that. But I think that's in some ways, that's a low bar to clear. I mean, even tonight's speech, I think, presented a fairly dark vision of America in certain categories. He talked about crime. He talked about a rise in violent crime. He did mention a statistic a bit more accurately than he had done previously. Previously, he talked about the crime rate supposedly being at the highest rate that it's been in 40 years, whereas tonight he was much more narrow in talking about the rise in 1 year, from 1 year to the next. He didn't mention that it's still essentially lower. It's the second lowest, annual crime rate going on in 40 years. He highlighted immigrants, but he talked a lot about the crimes that immigrants commit. I know that you've been talking about that already. This new office, which he's housing in the Department of Homeland Security, called VOICE, Victims of Immigration Crime Engagement. I'm not really sure how that fits into Homeland Security. The implication is that immigrants are running around committing crimes. In fact, of course, immigrants commit crimes at a lower rate than the native born. So there was a lot of darkness there in the speech. He tried to end with some inspirational moments, but I think his dark vision remained a central part of what he's presenting to the American people, especially when it comes to this attempt to paint immigrants in a really negative light and to talk about a crime wave that really is not reflected in the facts.
Hi there, it's Doug Herbert in the studio. You probably heard me talking also about immigrants just before you were speaking. Quick question. You've seen probably a lot of these presidential State of the Union addresses. This wasn't a State of the Union per se, but it was a speech of the joint session of Congress. How successful are presidents usually in actually swaying their audience and changing minds, in trying to persuade them to go with their agenda? Because that's at the end of the day what this is about. How successful do you think, in historical context, Donald Trump will be with this speech?
Well, if it's anything like the historical record of past presidents, he's not very successful. There have been some studies coming out of political science, one by Professor Edwards a few years back, that basically said that the bully pulpit is very overrated, that presidents are really unable to move the American people in terms of their support for specific policies in a way that helps those policies get passed. Essentially, it's sort of the other way around. It's however popular the president is or unpopular the president is, affects members of Congress' willingness to go out on a limb for that president. It's very, very difficult for a president to move the American people on specific policies. And we really didn't hear a lot of specific policies tonight. We heard talk about policy areas. The one big specific was this $1 trillion infrastructure plan, although we didn't hear about the specifics of what he meant by private capital versus public spending. This speech is not going to result in people calling members of Congress and saying, I want this policy or I don't want that policy. His big policy push is going to be Obamacare. The tide of popular opinion is turning against him there. Obamacare is more popular than it was even a few months ago. And I don't think this speech, and I don't think that's something specific to Trump, but I don't think this speech is going to move a lot of people in terms of gaining support for his legislative agenda.
Thank you very much for that. That's Ian Reifowitz joining us from New York.